Good evening. Welcome back to our study regarding the book of Acts. You know, we've been looking at Sabbath custom and practice after the resurrection to find clues to see where the Sabbath ever changed. In particular, we've been studying the book of Acts, Paul's customs and habits. And so we're going to pick up where we left off here at Acts 13, 42 through 44. We find it's especially significant that Paul and Barnabas, when speaking at a Jewish synagogue, were invited to speak again the next Sabbath. This would have been Paul's golden opportunity to tell the people to meet with him rather the next day, instead of waiting for a whole week for the Sabbath. But on the next Sabbath, almost the whole city of Jews and Gentiles alike gathered to hear the word. Yet today, most of the Christian professing, observing world keeps Sunday, the first day of the week, often calling it the Sabbath. But as we look closer, and I've made some side notes here in addition to this study, so bear with me, at Paul and his custom and habit of worship remaining true to Scripture, it's very interesting because there's all kinds of scholarly thoughts on Paul. It's even argued that perhaps he is the one who would be the founder of Christianity, of modern Christianity today. So it's very important to continue to examine. I referenced that we had studied the book of Acts, and I made some notes on Acts chapter 18, beginning at verse 1. I didn't particularly write down all of that scripture, but I just made some paraphrases and notes about Paul's, this record of his visit to Corinth. And according to Scripture, if you'll study with me and actually look at that portion, as I did earlier in my own private time, he stayed with fellow believers, Aquila and Priscilla. Now, while there, he went into the synagogue every Sabbath day and reasoned with people there. According to King James, when Silas and Timotheus were come, Paul was pressed in the Spirit. He continued to persuade people, and he testified to the Yahudim that Yeshua was Messiah. Now, when they reject this particular portion, prior to that, Paul entered Justus's house, whose house was hard joined to the synagogue, and that is Greek for meeting place. Then this key event occurs where Paul just presses them right down to where they live to make this decision, kind of a Billy Graham, I suppose, style confrontation. When they reject the word, that's they commonly call them Jews today. Back then in the first century, they were Yahudim. When the Yahudim reject, Paul turns to the Gentiles. So, he goes from one city to another city, and he's working first with Jews and then to Gentiles. And while Paul was there, Yeshua speaks to him by vision in the night, encouraging him. So we read, he was encouraging him to stay in that one particular city. So the scripture records that Paul's visit in that one particular region, that city, lasted a year and 6 months. That's 78 Sabbaths, if we do our mathematics and understand Paul's customs and habits of worship, 78 Sabbaths post-resurrection, why on earth would the one who's deemed by many scholars to be the founder of Christianity not make a clear break between what the world calls Judaism, even back then, and this so-called Christianity today? It's very, very odd that there's no plain-cut scripture in this biblical testimony. Rather, the New Testament plainly shows that we're to continue keeping the commandments found in Matthew 5:17 through 18, 19, 17, 28, 20, all 10. Where then do men get the authority to change the fourth commandment, which comes from the very finger of Elohim himself? A decree made by our Maker Creator by substituting. Where do men get the chutzpah to take it upon themselves to substitute Sunday for the original Sabbath that Christ and the apostles are noted for keeping? The Bible prophesied many centuries earlier, that the time would come, this is found in Daniel 7:25, when men would think to change times and laws. Many Bible prophecies, we understand, are dualistic in nature. They have both a type and antitype, an earlier and a later fulfillment. Now, if we look at this work, and I'm using this work that I've gotten from the internet to piece this together, this puzzle, and the watering down of the Sabbath in the first 300 years, I believe, is the title of the article you can find. The Christians, and I'm quoting, during the apostolic era, from about 35 to 100 AD, and you know I was going that over in my head, and I was thinking that was pretty close to right, kept Sabbath on the designated seventh day of the week. So that's for 100 years. For the first 300 years of Christian history, when Roman emperors regarded themselves as gods, Christianity became an illegal religion, quote unquote. God's people were scattered abroad. We find that in Acts chapter 8, verse 1. Judaism, however, was still regarded at that time as legal, as long as they obeyed Roman laws. Thus, during the apostolic era, Christians found it convenient to let the Roman authorities continue to think of them as Jews, which gained them legitimacy with the Roman government. However, when these same Jews rebelled against Rome, Rome put down their rebellion by force, destroying Jerusalem in 70 AD and again in AD 135. Obviously, the Roman government's suppression of the Jews at that time made it increasingly uncomfortable for Christians to be thought of as Jewish. Since at that time Sunday was the rest day of the Roman Empire, whose religion was Mithraism, a form of sun worship, we now begin to have a clearer understanding of when this so-called transformation took place. And since Sabbath observance is so visible to others, some Christians in the early 2nd century sought to distance themselves from Judaism by observing a different day, thus blending in with the society around them, don't you see? During the emperor-wide Christian persecutions under the following: Nero, Maximum, Diocletian, and Galerius, Sabbath-keeping Christians were hunted down, tortured, and for sport, often used for entertainment in the Roman Colosseum. This is true. Not only is it found in this record, but many subsequent records. There was one group that put out a DVD series, I believe it was in the last decade, within the last decade or so, that's called the Seventh-day Sabbath. And you know they have Hal, the one that played Mark Twain, Hal Holbrook, of course. They have him moderate this series, and this is a wonderful, eye-opening series. It's one that I deeply recommend. So we've exhausted our biblical testimony. We cannot find evidence of this change anywhere. We're going to have to look elsewhere to secular history to find out that at last we track down this change. Constantine the Great. Constantine made Sunday a civil rest day. Let's look at that article. When Emperor Constantine, a pagan sun worshiper, came to power in AD 313, he is the one who legalized Christianity and made the first Sunday-keeping law. His infamous Sunday enforcement law of March 7th, AD 321 reads as follows. Finally, we have found the place where by edict the Sabbath is laid aside for another day. It's in this decree, this pagan's decree. And you have to remember that Constantine had force and enforcement over the entire empire, don't you see? Here's the quote. On the venerable day of the sun, let the magistrates and people residing in cities rest, and let all workshops be closed. I'm going to cite a couple of references. Codex Justinianus and Philip Schaff, History of the Christian Church. The Sunday law was officially confirmed then by Roman papacy later on. The Council of Laodicea in AD 364 decreed, quote, Christians shall not Judaize and be idle on Saturday, but shall work on that day. But the Lord's day they shall especially honor, and as being Christians shall, if possible, do no work on that day. If, however, they are found Judaizing, they shall be shut off from Christ. End quote. The citation, Charles J. Heffel, A History of the Councils of the Church, published in 1876. So this is very, very interesting. Still in all, what this article does not bring forth is that many true-hearted, I suppose we'd use the word Christians at that time, still remained loyal to the faith and became a small remnant when most of the other officialdom buckled under. Nevertheless, reading on Faith of Our Fathers and so forth, it freely admits the 92nd edition. You may read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. You will not find a single line authorizing the sanctification of Sunday. The Scriptures enforce the religious observance of Saturday, a day which we, this is in brackets, the Roman Catholic Church, never sanctify. Again, the Catholic Church, by virtue of her divine mission, changed the day from Saturday to Sunday, as reflected in the Catholic Mirror, an official publication of James Cardinal Gibbons, September 23, 1893. Let's quote that one. Protestants do not, there's a staple here, I may lose part of the thought, realize that by observing Sunday, they accept the authority of the spokesperson of the Church, the Pope. Our Sunday Mirror, on February 5th, 1950, quote, of course, the Catholic Church claims that the change from Sabbath to Sunday was her, and the act is a mark of her ecclesiastical authority in religious things, in religious matters. H. F. Thomas, counselor of Cardinal Gibbons, quote, Sunday is our mark of authority. The Church is above the Bible. This transference of Sabbath observance is proof of that fact. End quote. Catholic Record of London, Ontario, September 1st, 1923. Revelation 13 makes mention of a mark of the beast, and that the entire world would worship both the beast and the dragon, except for those whose names are inscribed in the Lamb's Book of Life.